buying classes to so, but their life. We are going to be starting a new series in the book of Obadiah. We'd like to try to find that, the book of Obadiah. While you're turning, I'll kind of go ahead and start trying to introduce a little bit of this to you. The book of Obadiah, in this book, has been thought to be by many Bible scholars as a throwaway book. There's really no set time in which the instances within this Bible that Obadiah is prophesying on has been, given. Some say that it's still ongoing, and different things. There's a lot of different thought processes behind this book because it is listed in the minor prophets, which people kind of think that it's really not worth being in the Bible. But I hope that maybe by the time we get done with this study, we'll find out that it is important and it is something of value to us in today's time. Just as, the overall theme of this book that God deals with in his vision that he gives to Obadiah, it is something that we still continue to deal with even today. And we'll see a lot of this stuff as we go through this. What makes this a significant and relevant book in the Bible is it's a recorded conversation between God and this man named Obadiah. Now, Obadiah, there's not a lot we know about him. Most writers, if you paid attention when we're reading in the New Testament, most writers will introduce themselves, and give a little brief history about themselves or whatever. Like Paul usually would open a letter saying that it's, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, and we would know who the writer is. And different things like that. But Obadiah doesn't even mention his own name in this for introductory sakes. He just says in verse 1, he says, "The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord God concerning Edom, we have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle." And basically, the only thing that he says about himself is that he received this vision from God. That's it. And like I said, there's no, in his own writing, in his own words, there's no way to pinpoint exactly when it was that he received this, when it was exactly that he, as far as being able to chronologically put it, we do not know that today still yet. But the reason for this conversation is to reveal a vision that is to be relayed to a specific person and people. And we've seen that in that first verse where he's talking about concerning Edom. The vision of the Lord, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord God concerning Edom. And we'll learn more about them as we go. We also see that this vision is a timeless vision. As I said, it has transcended the annals of time. There's no start point, there's no end point, there's no specific thing that we can go back and put it on a calendar, like a date, like some things in the Bible we know, depending on who was reigning, when and where to fit that into a timeline of the Bible. This one's open. It's not significant, it's not pinpointed, but it's still relevant. This vision, like we said, is a timeless vision. transcended by many generations since it was given. Many have heeded the warning, yet many have not. But before we go any further, we'll go ahead and read just the whole book here. It's 28 verses, the shortest book in the Old Testament by far. It says, and we'll just pick up reading in verse 2 since we've already read verse 1. It says, Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee. Thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thine nest among the stars, hence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. If thieves come to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If the grape gatherers come to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall I not in the day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces and foreigners entering into the gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast as one of them. But thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother, in the day that he came a stranger, neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. Thou shouldest not have entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity, yea, thou shouldest not have looked on the affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. Neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape, neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of his that did remain in the day of distress. For the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. As thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head, for as ye have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. Yea, they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and they shall be as though they had not been. But upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness in the house of Jacob. And the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. And they shall kindle in them and devour them. And there shall be not any remaining in the house of Esau, for the Lord hath spoken it. And they of the south shall possess the mount of Esau, and they of the plain of the Philistines, and they shall possess the fields of Ephraim. And the fields of Samaria and Benjamin shall possess Gilead. And the captivity of his host of the children of Israel shall possess all that the Canaanites, even unto Zarephath, and the captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, shall possess the cities of the south. And Savior shall come upon Mount Zion to judge the mount of Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Now, as we've read in here, you've seen there's three different people that primarily that we want to take a look at. And I feel like that to fully understand what Obadiah is trying to say, one, we need to kind of understand these three people. One is the writer, Obadiah. As we said before we read our passage of scripture, he was an unknown individual. And what I mean by that is that in the Bible, there were 12 different men by the name of Obadiah mentioned. So because there's 12 different individuals, we don't know exactly which one, because we were not given any information, any background concerning the writer of Obadiah. We don't know who his family was. We don't have any lineage, any genealogy, anything that would tell us and pinpoint us to a time or a exact person. Yet this man has the least information about him. He doesn't even introduce himself in his own writings. So like we said, there's not a lot of information, which makes it difficult. But in that, hopefully we can learn something. This character trait is probably the reason in which God used him. And by saying that, God's always going to he's going to find someone who's out to serve him for him, not for himself. There's a lot of people, the Bible even tells us several different times that for those that seeking praise of man, they've got their reward. Obadiah was a quiet man. He was just kind of a under the radar kind of individual. And that's who God typically is going to use. And God used Obadiah here to prophesy the destruction of an entire people. That's kind of something that you don't really want to take too lightly, but it's something that kind of speaks to just exactly why Obadiah was chosen. A lot of times God will seek out those that are quiet, those that are not seeking to be seen of man, to do something great for the kingdom of God. And that was the greatest character trait that Obadiah had. People today, like we said, a lot of people today are seeking the recognition. Piggybacking off of what Josiah was teaching on 2 weeks ago, the fact that he was, we closed out his lesson when we were talking about how the least shall be greatest in the kingdom of heaven. That's what we're talking about here. Obadiah was the least of any man that God could have chosen to write such a horrific prophecy, a horrific vision. We know that this did come true. Yet it is one of those never-ending visions, like we've said. We can see that in the events that happened here, we can also see the same events happen in other people's lives even today. When we get to that point to where we think that we're something that we're not, the overall theme of this chapter is pride. That is what inevitably brought down Edom. And we'll continue to look a little bit more into that. But Obadiah was direct. He was straight. You look back at verse 1, it says, the vision of Obadiah. That's it. He gets right into what God put on his heart, and he lays out the vision that God has given him. And he gets right to work, sort of like the preacher's been talking about with Mark in our study upstairs on Sunday mornings. Obadiah was a lot like Mark. He didn't beat around the bush. He just got right to it and got right into it. Have you ever heard a phrase, a man of few words? If you understand what that means and what the meaning behind that is that a man that speaks very few words, when he does speak, we should what?
Listen.
we should listen. Because a lot of times these people have a lot of wisdom about them. They have a lot of information that they have gathered in their lifetime. They're not one out here talking just to be talking. I'll you throw this out. Yesterday Lori had just got home from work, and we was in the bedroom, and the cat was laying there on the bed, and we were just kind of sitting there on the bed with him, and he kept flicking his tails as cats do. And I started talking about his tail being a noodle. And I got to talking about how, it wasn't like a pool noodle, because, a pool noodle has a hole in the middle of it. The cat's tail doesn't have one, but it was just flicking it around like a wet spaghetti noodle. And I was just talking just to be talking. And Lori was laughing. Then later on, Brady was sitting in the kitchen while we were in there, and he starts meowing and talking about how he was a cat and how that he, and he's talking just to be talking, just being silly. And he's talking about how he had to have his meow box removed because if he didn't when he was little, he would die. And I'm like, and he's just carrying on and on and on. He gets up and walks out, and I look over at Lori and I said, wow, imagine that, our son having surgery that we had no idea about and everything, and that's, a couple of comedic stories just to illustrate a point is that a lot of times people, we just like to talk. How many of you know people? I carry that. I know. I carry that stigma.
I'm the quietest one at the house. What do you mean?
And there's 3 or 4 of us here in the church that can talk and like to talk. I guess I'm kind of guilty, and I'm one of those. But those that sit back and a lot of times don't really say a whole lot. They're just watching, they're observing, and they're seeing what's going on, and they're assessing everything. When these men speak, a lot of times you need to listen. We need to listen to them. And that's who Obadiah was. Obadiah was a man that didn't get a lot of pub. He didn't get a lot of speak. He didn't get a lot of time out front. He wasn't probably someone that you would think of first when it comes to relaying something of the importance that God is trying to get across here in his vision and in this book and his prophecy. You wouldn't necessarily go to him. If you were wanting to get something said, who are you going to go to a lot of times? Those that's not afraid to talk. Those that's not afraid to get out and be out front. That's who we typically think of. But God, a lot of times, will use someone who, believe it or not, is a quiet, kind of reserved individual. I can't tell you the times that I've heard different preachers that's come through here talking about how shy and backward they are, but when it's go time and they're preaching or they're doing part of their calling, you would never even know it. And believe it or not, that's a lot of the way that I am. I know that's hard to believe, but I'm not very good at being around people that I don't know. I've never met before and everything. And usually when I first meet people, I'm quiet. I don't really say a whole lot. I'm kind of reserved, but once I get to know you, once we get to know each other and stuff, it's a different thing, then, because you're what's the difference when you first meet somebody versus knowing somebody? What's the biggest difference in the two?
Being comfortable.
Being comfortable around them.
Don't you think that's what it's like as a new Christian sometimes? You don't want to, you feel like, well, I'm not doing this right. Am I supposed to be doing it? Am I supposed to be talking directly to the Lord? Am I supposed to talk to somebody else about the Lord? What am I supposed to be doing that I'm not doing?
To a certain degree. I mean, but that's just kind of what we're, this is all in who, and basically we're having to put together a picture of Obadiah based on what we don't know. And that's kind of what we're hoping to get across, because, when you think of the great writers of the Bible, who are some of the great writers that automatically come to your mind?
Paul.
Anybody else?
Moses.
Luke.
Moses.
Anybody else? You got David, Solomon, you got Daniel. Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, we know that. Paul wrote the biggest part of the New Testament.
John.
You got Peter, John, Mark, Matthew, Ezra. All these people had a part in it. All of these people had something that had a characteristic trait about them that God was able to use. These were all people that were prominent. Who was Moses? One, he was Pharaoh's stepson, adopted in, and then he was the chosen one to bring the nation of Israel out. How much more great of an individual could you get to write and pen down the first 5 books of the Bible than Moses? Paul being the predominant writer of the New Testament, this is a man who, when he first started in his calling, in his own ministry as a Pharisee, he was the one that was sent out by the Sadducees and the other Pharisees and chief priests and stuff to go out and to rid the world at that time of those who professed Christ. Yet on the road to Damascus, what happened to this man? He met the Lord, and he changed, and now he's one going after the calling that God put on his life. The first calling was his own calling, was the one that he was kind of brought through because of who he was, where he was in society at that time. And now God has intervened in his life and has put a different calling on his life. And now we have the majority of the New Testament because of him. And the fact that this was a prominent individual. Luke was the doctor. A doctor. Who are you going to go see when you're sick? You're going to go to a doctor. If you go to a doctor, I happen to be one of those who try not to go to the doctor. But like I said, these were all people. They had some type of influence in society. A lot of the writers, but then we get down to this obscure little book called Obadiah, and we know absolutely nothing outside of what he wrote. And like I said, when it comes down to, and we're going back to that little statement there of, a man of few words, when they speak, you need to listen. And I think that's what in my opinion, that's kind of what a lot of scholars, biblical scholars, high influential people today fail to recognize when it comes to the book of Obadiah. They fail to recognize the fact that this is a man who had, was a basic nobody. He just kind of come on the scene and is off the scene. No, there's nothing in the Bible that tells us what happened about his upkeep, his upbringing, till the time he come on the scene, was given the vision, relayed the vision, and then he disappears off the face of the earth again. That's what we're dealing with. Those types of people are the people that oftentimes we need to pay attention to. We need to listen to when they do have something, because a lot of times what they do have to say is valuable. You hear people, and you see memes on Facebook and social media and different things. If you see an old man in overalls eating an apple with a pocket knife, you need to listen to him because he's got a lot of wisdom about him. That's Obadiah. Obadiah had a lot of wisdom in the fact that God gave him something to do, he'd done it, and then he got off the scene. He did not want attention brought to himself. All he wanted to do was what God had put in his heart to do, and then he was done and gone. You know, and that's the thing. There are several sins listed in many different parts of the Bible. Now, this is kind of getting into what Obadiah is writing about. There are several sins that are in many different parts of the Bible that God has taken issue with. But this one book / vision deals specifically with only, and I'm trying to emphasize only, one sin. And that sin in particular is pride. That is the sole purpose of this entire book. How many of you heard, pride goes before the fall? I mean, that's just it. I mean, when we get to the point to where we think we're, big and mighty and different things like that, then that's when we fall. How many of you have ever studied the nation of Israel taken into Canaan land? What was one of the first obstacles of the nation of Israel taking over Canaan land? What was the biggest obstacle they had? They're in the promised land. They have to go in and possess it. What's the first obstacle that they had to face? Anybody know? Jericho. Now, if you understand and know the city, the history of the city of Jericho, Jericho was one of the heaviest fortified cities in that time. I mean, the walls so thick and high that people actually lived in the walls of the city. To possess the land, this is the first test. This is the first test of the nation of Israel. And they go up, and Joshua's like, what are we going to do? He goes off to seek the Lord. That's when he sees the warrior standing there with the flaming sword, and he's like, are you with us or against us? And he said, I am the lead, I am the host. And Joshua falls on his face and worships him because he recognizes who this individual is, that this individual gives him the battle plan as, for lack of a better term, but you know that he had to go away from that scratching his head going, we're going to march around the walls 6 days one time. The 7th day, we're going to march around the walls 7 times. And on the 7th time, they're going to blow the trumpets and with a great shout. That's what they were told. Now, if you're taking on one of the heaviest fortified cities that you have to overtake, and that's the battle plan, that's going to leave a lot of people scratching their head. But yet, the person that told them the battle plan was the one who was going to deliver the battle plan into their hands. And the nation of Israel did as they were told. On the 7th time, when they come around the city, the trumpet sounds, then the troops shout, the earth just swallow up the walls, and the city is theirs. They go in, possess it, and do away with the people of Jericho. And then they proceed on. But then they get to this little point, to this little city called Ai. Anybody ever heard of the city of Ai? Ai was a little city. Their battle plan was, when they went up against Jericho, what happened? Joshua sought the Lord, right? We've already established that. He goes out and seeks the Lord. Then when they go up to Ai, the people get together and go, well, we've done won however many battles. This is a little city. There's not that many people. We just need to take up X amount of people, and we can wipe the face of the earth with them. And the nation of Israel, within their own self, go up to this little city called Ai, and they lose more men in that battle, and they're sent running for their lives against a small city. Why? Because of pride. That pride that they had, saying, we don't need God in this little thing over here. We can handle that. We can take care of them. They're not that big. They're not that important. We can handle that. And when they went up within their own strength, they found out real quick, they need God. So then they come back, they seek the Lord, and then they're finally able to take Ai after a great loss. So pride is a thing. And like I said, that's the only thing that this Bible, that this chapter, that this book has to deal with. You will look over the book of Proverbs right quick. We'll finish this out. Proverbs 6, verse number 16 through 19 says, These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. An heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. The first one, verse number 17, that first thing, what does it say? A proud look. That's Solomon's way of telling us pride is the biggest issue God has with his creation. That's us. That's this world. We are his creation. The biggest thing, the biggest battle that we face in life is pride. I mean, you hear people getting into the different, skirmishes and squabbles and arguments and this and that, and somebody finally gets proved wrong and they don't want to admit it. What is that? That's that pride within themselves that will not allow them to admit that they were wrong. That is the biggest thing that we as a human race, as individuals, have to deal with, is the pride that exists within each and every one of us. We all have it. At some's stronger, some's not as bad, but we all have this sense of pride that is within each and every one of us. And what we do with that pride, how we allow that one little thing to rule in our lives a lot of times will depend on what we can do and how God can use us in his work. I mean, I'm not going to say Obadiah didn't have any kind of pride issues in his life. We don't know. But knowing human nature and knowing the things that exist today, that's existed since the beginning of time within this human nature, Obadiah had some pride issues. But yet he did not allow those things to come, that become a thing that would keep God from being able to use him in a mighty way. So Obadiah, that's just kind of the introduction here of who this writer was and who he is and what he stands for and why God used in such an obscure man to deliver such a vision of destruction to a nation. Just something that we kind of look at. Now next week we'll try to get into looking at the other two characters, Jacob and Esau. All right, you are free to go.